Do you feel that in a time when we are more connected than ever, we are drifting away from real human connection, especially to ourselves? I do. Hi, I'm Leticia Latino, and I want to invite you to join me and my very inspiring guests in exploring ways to reconnect to your essence, to your definite purpose, to what makes you tick. Are you ready? Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Back to Basics, Reconnected to the Essence of You. My guest today is Maddy Roche, founding team member at XYPN, former vice president of Getting Shit Done, executive business coach, and podcast host. She helps build the systems and culture that support the thousands of financial advisors through entrepreneurship while coaching leaders through mindset, burnout, and the courage to define success on their own terms. Now at Childfree Trust, she continues her mission, ensuring people have access to values-aligned financial guidance and permission to build lives that actually fit them. Hello, Maddy, and welcome to Back to Basics.
Hi, Leticia. Nice to be here.
I'm very excited. I like your approach, the titles of your companies. I can see you're bold, and I love the kind of guests. And you know, it's just very intriguing when I was doing research on you on, what you do right now. We're going to get into it, but I just feel I'm going to learn a lot on this episode. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to sharing what I know and introducing your audience to the concept of kind of the child-free demographic and who we are and what and how life can be different.
Awesome. And so let's start at the origin story. And I'm sure I've said this many times in my interviews, but it's true. Every time I introduce somebody, I say, probably we're not dreaming about maybe doing the career or having the career you're having right now, but I'm sure somewhere there's a superpower of a passion that was showcased early on. So tell us about young Maddy.
Oh, young Maddy. She was always so worried. I feel like now as an older, not an older adult, but as I've reached almost 40, I'm finally looking back at life and realizing I did not need to stress as much as I did. For so long, I was worried about money and what I was going to do with my life and how I was going to make it. And if I knew where I would be at my age when I was young, I would have been a very different young Maddy. But I wouldn't want to change anything. I was always quite driven. I was always very interested in my own personal finance, whether it was me saving every dollar I ever earned as a babysitter or really managing and trying to figure out how to pay off my own student loans when I graduated from college. I was really drawn to the personal finance space and didn't realize it was a profession until a few years after I graduated. And I ended up getting a really impressive and wonderful opportunity to be the first employee at an organization called XY Planning Network. And that was an organization that helped financial advisors run their own businesses. And we grew that network to over 2,000 advisors around the country in 10 years. And I knew almost every single one of them in their entrepreneurial journey. And I was so impressed with what it took to build a financial planning firm. But during that time, I was also becoming financially sound myself and learning the language and understanding what it takes to be able to begin to relax into your own financial picture. And it was actually during that job that I met my current founder, Jay Zigmont, who is running Childfree Wealth. And Childfree Wealth is a financial planning firm that works exclusively with child-free people. And I am a queer woman and I have no children and I'm not planning on having any children. And it really took my breath away as I did a one-time session with him around how different my life is going to be because I'm not going to have kids. And that is what kind of catapulted me into my new journey, which is helping build Childfree Trust. And it was really kind of full circle having a financial planning session with Jay. To your point, Leticia, around who young Maddy was, just how different life is based on what I thought it was going to be when I was young.
Interesting. And one of the things I really love is to find niche. Obviously you found a niche and it's specific, but I also love the fact that it's almost unapologetically like I respect that because I do have friends that they chose not to have kids, and I find myself having to defend them very often, like because people want to create who knows whatever stories about why this is. And it's very respectful to say this is having kids is not for everybody. And the fact that owning it, like saying I'm not gonna do it, and not only that, I can actually be more intentional about my financial plan, because everybody says, well, they don't have kids, so of course they have disposable income. So your money is draining your kids when you do have them. But just that realization is very, very powerful.
Yeah. And it's an identity that not all of us have adopted. And it really wasn't an identity that I adopted before I got into this business. I knew I wasn't going to have kids for a long time. It just hasn't happened. I didn't really want them. And I as I've grown older, I've just decided that this is actually a really proactive choice of mine. But it wasn't like I was waking up every day like, I'm child free and I'm going to look for child free things. It just was, I have a community of women in my life that don't have kids. And it to your point, it is not the easiest conversation to talk about with people that have kids. I'm actually amazed the number of times I talk to parents about what I do and my choice not to have children, and the varied responses I get from parents around, that's the best thing you could ever do is don't have kids. Or, like people just kind of start confiding, and it's, there's a lot of misconceptions about our community too, around decisions about why we didn't have children. And we've done studies on reasons why people don't have kids, and just not wanting them is the number one reason. And finances is a pretty close second or third. Then there's, components around in the environment and passing on mental health issues. So there's a whole varied reason, but not liking children is actually on the lower, the end of the research study. So it's a misconception that we don't love children and want to be around them. But I think it's, especially for women, it's this expectation since we were little to have dolls and take care of them. And I nannied my whole life and held babies that were, just infants, and saw them through their, kindergarten graduation, that there's this expectation that women have children. And I really found throughout my life at different turning points that I was really going against the traditional life script, and, from deeply personal ways to kind of who I am as a person. But I decided as I moved into this role and over the past few years to really start embracing that I'm child free and try to elevate the conversation around it so more women and men can feel seen about it.
No, I think I respect that very much, because as I always say, we all have a calling, and that doesn't all involve having families. And I am a big proponent. I have 2 kids, but I always say I feel a little guilty because I love them and I don't want them to grow up. I have an 11-year-old and 15-year-old, but I will admit that sometimes I fantasize when they are out of the house and I get to be me on my own with my husband again. And we always feel a little guilty even admitting it. And some other parents say, "Are you crazy? I don't want ever to leave." And I'm like, no, I can't. It's exciting, but also because it's exciting to think of them, starting their lives as adults. That's also is very exciting to me. I'm going to miss the little kids they are now. And we always say, when you have kids, you lose a child and you gain a child every day, because every day they stop doing something you love and that you're going to dearly miss. But then they start doing other things that's even more fun, and like even as you get to relate to them as adults, it's very, very exciting. But I'm on your, it's like if it wasn't going to be with the right person, I didn't feel like needed to have children to be happy or be fulfilled. I was always a little different from some people that actually that was the goal number one is let me go have kids.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I just want to, this something you said around, we don't all want families. That's actually some language that we've tried to change a bit, because we do have families. I have chosen families. I have my own families. I have my fur families. I have my friend families. So this idea of like, there's some bias in language around this assumption of what traditional family is and things like that, we as child-free people are up against, that just because I'm not having children doesn't mean that I don't have a family. Just because I won't marry my partner doesn't mean that she's not my person for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that fair point. And I think these are things that, that as you say, is bias in the way we speak. And so it's important to relate and life families, I'm big on that. As an immigrant, I'm big on, when you left your country, left your origin family behind, then, totally. You know that family is whomever is close to you when you need it the most. So that it's certainly amazing. So you were employee number 1 in this company that you helped create. What for entrepreneurs out there, for people that have their own businesses? I know you're big on burnout, so I also want to touch upon that. But what piece of wisdom you want to share from that, growing to that extent, from being one employee to, as you say, sharing, like we were 200 consultants and growing incredibly fast.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is Childfree Trust is the second startup experience I've had, and building something from nothing and turning an idea into reality is a beautiful thing to be part of. And, this is sometimes what I think I'm trading children for, is that now I've been part of kind of creating businesses that are babies, and how do we get them to grow up and mature and function without all of us and things like that. The experience and I just encourage entrepreneurs to go get it. If they want to start businesses, they should. More beautiful things can happen in this world when we have people following and chasing their dreams and starting businesses around them. I really, truly believe that the more that we can tap into what our real essence is and exchange that for value versus working under the corporate structure of what capitalism gives us, we can really make change. So I encourage anyone who's got the inkling to be an entrepreneur to go do it. But from my experience at XY Planning Network, over the 11 years I was there, we went from 1 employee, me, to over 100 employees. The hardest part was the people management. The hardest part was getting the right people on the bus, making sure they were sitting in the right seats, and making sure that we were all driving in the right direction. And it's yet to be seen if that's the same challenge that Childfree Trust has. It's a very different company. It's a very different market. It's a very different service offering. But I'm excited to see, after a few years with Childfree Trust, what the learning is from that startup experience.
Well, it sounds fascinating. And you make it sound easy and nice, but it's obviously, anybody that has done startups and created something from nothing, it's overwhelming. Many times, I'm sure you ended up doing things you didn't know how to do, and you have to figure it out so many times. So that leads undoubtedly to burnout and like feeling you cannot do it. I mean, how many times in that journey maybe you said that this is not possible? I mean, how do you overcome those situations? And also, how do you recognize, in your case, burnout? And you're also a business coach, as I understand, right? So what have you seen in that? Where do people get stuck, and what do we do as individuals in our jobs that allow ourselves to burn out?
Good question. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what my theory is around helping other entrepreneurs build businesses. And what I've really settled on is that we as a culture are very addicted to the growth mindset and to this, we must grow. If we're not growing, we're dying. I don't agree with that philosophy just at a fundamental level. I think there's a lot of beauty in remaining still and present, and maybe even reducing in size and turning inward. So I've started to really kind of conceptualize this idea of, sustainability versus scalability. And, the entrepreneurs that I've worked with over the years have been primarily financial advisors. And there's this idea that, well, I've got to scale a business. I've got to be able to make more for less work. And I think that's a really dangerous mindset to go after when you're a creative entrepreneur, when really I think life is about finding balance and finding a way to be sustainable in the business that you're building. And from my experiences at startups, making sure that we're okay when we slow things down and when we focus on what will feed us and, emotionally and personally and at the business level, that keeps us in this business longer than just trying to always make more for less. When we're focused on growth, I don't believe humans are satisfied by accumulating money. Yes, money solves a lot of problems. I will not argue with that. There is data around that. Happiness increases at a certain threshold, but it doesn't increase at certain thresholds also. So this idea that more is what's going to invite satisfaction in life is not true. And what I've seen among the entrepreneurs I've worked with, the people that are growing for a dollar amount, burnout. People who are growing to be in this business long-term and love their life are in it long-term and love their life.
That's a beautiful say feedback from people that maybe don't see, like in your position, you get to see, you get to plan, you get to financially advise people, and I do agree with that. That when you're chasing the dollar sign, probably happens faster, but at a price. I've seen it in my own environment where I've seen great families unfortunately disbanded, or people completely sick or even committed suicide. Unfortunately, I had a good friend that thought that was the best option he had, and it is so painful to think of that. And mostly because of money. It's always something related to money in the mix. And so this is something that, for those chasing let's say the longer term, as you say you end up seeing more fulfilled. But do you feel that they also sometimes get impatient, like when it doesn't happen fast enough, that you kind of say you're happy with your life, but inevitably human beings, we live by comparison, right? Like chasing up the Joneses, famous thing. And so I wonder, from your perspective, and you see all sorts of people, what is it that you see? What does it take to be patient enough to build the life you want, as it relates to the financial stability?
Really good question. And, comparison is the thief of joy. It just is. Anytime we start comparing ourselves to someone else, we immediately neurologically, somatically feel like shit. Pardon my language. It happens when if that is our yardstick for how well we're doing, we are living externally. And part of my own, religious philosophies and things like that come back to that. External is not where we need to be looking. It's always internal. So, part of this is also, how do we remain confident and trust the process of what life is unfolding and how it's unfolding, and trusting that there's more to be discovered with life, versus thinking that we can always be in control, that we can always be planning, we can always be doing to ensure the future. We don't know what the future has to offer. So I think the balance I have over the years tried to instill in my coaching clients is getting really comfortable with the discomfort of what it means to sit and be patient. And, what's amazing is, as you look back, as hindsight, we started our conversation with a look back at young Maddy. I would have never been able to picture what the past 25 years transpired. So any of us trying to think what the next 25 is going to do is impossible. And there's studies that our brain actually chews and thinks better around 5 to 7 years than ever trying to plan for the future. And so when we think about, financial planning, and in the world of child-free people, a lot of us child-free people are going to have a very different financial life, because at some point we need to start deaccumulating. I don't have to pass on wealth to my next generation. I don't have a next generation. So the idea of I need to accumulate so I die with a couple million in my portfolio isn't my future. So how do I change my mindset instead to how do I start using money in my current life to make sure that I enjoy it the whole time and not necessarily have to chase what others are chasing, which is accumulation.
That's fascinating. And in your perspective, because I do tend to agree that and you said it, we come from this mentality where more, it's needed, right? And I think some fortunate people are amassing incredible amount of money that they're not going to live to enjoy. And then most of those people also don't take the time to enjoy. But let's say you take the time to enjoy, but it's so much that you obviously are not gonna, there's so many travels and so many luxuries you can have.
Right.
Right. So help us demystify, like, what in your mind, even for the clients you advise, assuming, you're working person and you're the kind of person that even if you have children, you say, well, my children will figure it out. I want to live my life and they have to figure their own life. Like, what is that number that you say allows you the freedom to, travel, enjoy life in a way where it's not exuberant, but also not, your common day? It's like, is that because you always say, well, a millionaire is not a million anymore, of course. Right. What's the millionaire guideline these days? Because I think that part of where people get unhappy is that they don't have a goal. Like, I always say, like, I thank God I'm fortunate. I have the life I want. I know I have a nice house. I never dream about bigger house. I am, I come from a place where enoughness makes me happy. I never try to, I like to work and I like to chase, of course, but more for my self-development, not so much for the financial. But of course, you also want to have that peace of mind that like I can do what I want to do when I want to do it.
Totally. And let me just be clear for the audience. I am not a financial planner. I've never been one, but I have coached hundreds of them over the years, if not thousands. There's a million one-liners about the 4% rule, and you can your portfolio, you can pull 4 to 8% out every year, things like that, and you can find your number. That requires you to know exactly how much you're going to spend over the years, and we just don't know. But I do know from lived experience, and I know a community I'm building around me also agrees that when we are constantly trying to add things into our lives that are material, we aren't any more satisfied. Now, there are things that we can buy with money, like time and comfort, that really change happiness. And when I see entrepreneurs and people working, grinding, and their kids are growing older and they've not taken any time to pause, they're not earning for any reason other than to accumulate money. And that you're missing the purpose of life at that point. So I would encourage people to think about, how do you get more of your time back? Time freedom is one of the best things we can have. Health freedom, remaining healthy longer, is a huge opportunity that we have. And then giving. Giving is a huge part of this. And for the child-free community, we're huge givers. When the advisors at Childfree Wealth work with child-free people, they will present to a child-free couple that they have an $8 million problem on their hands, that you have too much money and you're not spending enough because you're going to die with a couple $1 million. And where's it going to go? To your charities? Great. But charities probably could have used your money while you were alive. And you could have given more because you have better tax benefits if you give while you're alive versus when you pass away. So how are you using the money you have currently to help other people start businesses? I'm in the business right now of Childfree Trust. We're raising money from an investor level. And what has shocked me about investors is how tightwad so many people are when we know they've got a lot of money. And to me, if I ever came into a lot of money, I will be giving that money away to any woman that wants to start a business, any queer person that wants to start a business. You get my money, you get to go do it. So I'm amazed where there's still this mentality of scarcity with people and willingness to share what truly can change the world, which is money. Money is a fabulous tool. How do we get people to want to give more? And I think audience members, like, please think about your gifting strategy, whether it be that, anyone you see that's asking for money, you give money to, or you have a list of charities you want to give to, or you've got some entrepreneurs you want to, help them bootstrap their businesses with no strings attached, cash and, injections. There's just a lot you can do with it.
I think that's a very valid point. And I have to say, I totally agree. And it only became apparent how bad it is with people and giving when, if you want to know it for yourself, join a nonprofit that you are passionate about and that has a good cause and a good mission. Like, I'm part of two nonprofits. One, accessibility in the arts and musicians with disabilities. I mean, young kids that have some sort of disability, who wouldn't resonate with that? Like, help them realize their dream. And then supporting small businesses. Everybody has a small business where you buy your coffee, where you buy, and these are real people, with challenges. And to your point, like, organizations, people that have so many resources and that they could put it back into that, kind of paid forward model where you're not like, even a very small percentage can change the life of a small business owner or of a young musician with a disability. And it's very hard. I never realized it, how hard it is for others when you start trying to ask for help, or, why would you? Sometimes you join this would be easy. This cause is so easy, or, human trafficking or things that are just so, any empathetic person would resonate with. Yeah. And it's very hard.
And that's where I think our culture is sick. And that's where I think this capitalist, this capitalist idea of growth can make us sick. And if we're growing and we can't stop and give, and we're losing our, one in beautiful chance to be alive, then there was no reason to do this. And, to your point around, what's the number where we don't have to work and things like that. I think all the time that you don't work a day in your life if you love your job. And many of us will be very, very lucky if we grow old and we're still working. And coincidentally, this morning, I'm talking to my partner. She's a couples therapist, and she wants to be 80 and still being a couples therapist. And I said, she absolutely will be, because she loves her work. And so why, earning money isn't why she's doing this. She's doing this because we're not having kids. She wants to, recycle her knowledge, and she wants to help people. And, to me, freedom is, I get to do work regardless of whether I'm paid for it or not. I get to do what I'm driven to do, and I'm not thinking about compensation. That's the shackles, the golden handcuffs, the feelings of I got to do this because my employer is going to pay me for it, changes our essence and relationship with the work, where, for those of us who volunteer regularly, we know that lights us up and revs our engines way more sometimes than other work.
I totally agree. And, I've said this in my podcast, so sorry for my loyal listeners, but my dad is 90. He'll be 92 this year, and he goes to the office every single day. My best friend's dad just turned 99, and he goes to his office.
Really?
I swear on my kids. And
so they love their job?
They just different generation. And I have never heard either saying the word retirement ever. And so it's, it's food for thought, to your point. When I hear here in the US, it's like everybody's counting the minutes. Like I've seen people with the counter down, they show me on their phone and they have the retirement countdown, which to me, honestly, is scary. That to think that you're living a life, because what counts down is your life. It truly is. So you're counting down on your own life so that you can retire. Meanwhile, you don't know if you're going to make it there, because God has to give you that blessing. So it's very scary. And then people are trying to exercise more, eat healthy more. And, blue zones, analysis and research, they talk about, the Japanese call it ikigai, others call it fulfillment, passion, loving what you do. And it's definitely, you talk to people like my dad, they love what they do. They love what they do. It has problems, it has challenges, absolutely. But showing up and being happy about what you're doing, I think is a huge component into living a long and happy life.
Yeah. And I do want to recognize that, the things that you and I are talking about, as beautiful as they sound, there is a level of privilege to it, to tell someone that, oh, you should go be an entrepreneur, spend more and give more there. I'm speaking from a huge level of privilege at that point. And,
Yes.
there is a huge part of our community and a huge part of our country that are facing the countdown to retirement because that is economically how it works for them. And I just want to tip my hat to the fact that capitalism is a gnarly thing to live in, and that is part of the reality. And so as we talk about, you have an $8 million problem, I just want to honor the fact that this is like a very privileged conversation.
Absolutely. And yeah, but here at Back to Basics is usually aligning with what makes us tick, is the center of the conversation. And I try to inspire those, to your point. Yes, there are those that say, hey, I need my paycheck. I have my dreams, but without my paycheck. But I always say it here. We've had many guests, many, that had this is a privileged conversation from the angle we're approaching. We've had many guests that, the hardship and challenges that they wanted to share. And I'm sure you've had your own, and we are discussing at a different level here because it's an angle that is interesting as well. And we haven't touched upon a lot on the show. It's usually like, all these bad things happened to me, and this is like bad. And I was suicidal. I don't know how many guests that have felt vulnerable enough to share these stories. And then, even if they needed to live paycheck by paycheck, because they allow themselves to dream, they align with their passion, with what makes them tick, they got out of that. And so I'm very big on that. I recognize it, but I always like to push the audience into that uncomfortable area where it's scary to think of something else. It's very comfy to think that I keep doing this for X amount of more days and I'm going to have a retirement, but maybe you're missing on something bigger or something you were meant to do in life. And so that's my biggest thing is don't get comfy. If you're truly happy and fulfilled, fantastic. But if you feel there's something in there that you want to go chase, you don't have to quit your job to chase it. You can find a way where you can bake it into what you're doing.
So well said. And thank you for that. I was just listening to a podcast the other day talking about entrepreneurship versus staying at your standard 9 to 5. So many of us, have stayed at our 9 to 5s thinking it's safe. It's what I need to do. It's actually way less safe than going out and trying something that you feel really passionate about. And people often say that having a plan B actually prevents you from really going after your plan A. And there's putting trust and betting on yourself is a really, really strong bet versus betting on that a corporation is going to keep your position in the department that you are at the level that you're being paid at amongst a very shifting economy and world. This idea like my job will always be there. We're seeing in droves how that is changing amongst different industries. And so this idea of safety, building something on your own and, becoming an entrepreneur is actually a really great opportunity for people to take.
That's great. Thank you for that. So on your newest venture, Childfree Trust, is there anything that we haven't touched upon that you want to share with the audience? We've spoken a little bit about the mission. Anything that you want to highlight from that work?
Sure. Yeah. So Childfree Trust is a perfect example of an entrepreneur saying that there is a problem that needs to be solved and then going after and solving it. And that is our founder, Dr. J. So 25% of Americans don't have kids. It's a much higher percentage than a lot of us understand. A big question that many of us face is who's going to take care of me when I'm older? And that is a question even my mom asked me as recent as 2 weeks ago. If I'm not having kids, who's going to take care of me when I'm older? The challenge many of us face is that when we go to do our estate documents, when we fill out a will, our healthcare proxy, our medical and financial POA, our trust, we know where we want our money to go. We know what our advanced healthcare directives should say, but we don't have anyone necessarily to act on our behalf for us. And so I'm speaking mainly kind of to the 55 and older group that is looking at estate planning saying, I really need to get this done, but oh my gosh, I don't have someone I trust to make decisions for me. Childfree Trust was set up to actually be a professional fiduciary. So we can be listed in your child-free estate documents as your medical and financial POA, executor, and trustee. So this is the first of its kind offering. There's no one else in the country that's doing this in all 50 states. We can actually serve in those capacities so that if you feel like you need someone, a third party, to be able to make sure your wishes are followed and that you don't end up in the guardianship trap or the conservatorship trap without, an actual advocate, that is the problem we've solved. And so for $1,000 a year, you can sign up for Childfree Trust. You can get your estate planning documents done, and you can have us listed in any of those capacities. So it's something we know people have been looking for. I've seen story after story after story of people's lives at end of life ending in a way that they didn't want because they didn't have an advocate, and that's the problem that we as Childfree Trust are solving.
Yeah, well, it sounds compelling for sure. I think I like to say that I can recognize good ideas, good product, good solution. Definitely, you're definitely serving an underserved community and making it easy. And if it's stress, this is the part of life that gets very stressful, like not knowing what's going to happen. And so when you have somebody to rely on and that it understands exactly, it's not that you have to customize to a point where you don't feel that comfortable. This is I think this is great. So yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about a lot of things. One of the things that I'm, of course, passionate about is what makes you tick. So that's always going to be my question. So in those days where you are, feeling a little bit less optimistic and you need to realign, you mentioned spirituality, you mentioned what are the things that are your go-to practice that help your soul reconnect to who you are?
It's coincidental. I've meditated for over a decade regularly, and I did a 10-day silent meditation this time last year, a little over a year, called Vipassana, which is really, it's a 10-day, no speaking, no exercising, no reading, no writing, no eye contact, silent meditation. And it changed my life, and it allowed me very quickly to see what my internal stories are, what we have on repeat, how we physiologically respond to thoughts. And so, as I've been a practice meditator and been advancing my relationship to Buddhism, I've really understood just the power of meditation. But it was after that I stopped meditating for a long time. And it was only just recently that I'm back and I've got my meditation bolster right down beneath me that I've been sitting every morning again. And so quickly, it's like a muscle that you just forget you have. And it's a power muscle. And it sounds cliche, but meditation and body work and body movement and, of course, running my dogs in the mountains and being out in, nature all feed my soul. But I am amazed the kind of feedback I get so quickly from returning to my meditation practice. It feels like the secret to life. You just see things so much more clearly.
Yeah, and silence and shutting down the noise have come up often as one of the things that make people tick. And it's hard. It's hard to shut down all that goes on in our brains. So I can totally see that. And I mean, that's supposed to be my last question, but I'm curious. Do you know why you stopped meditating after being so constant? Is it something that you allow the busyness of life to get in the way, or if you can share?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I've gone back to this idea that I do a lot to better myself. Like I am sober because of my own relationship with substance and alcohol. or I'm sober from alcohol. I've done a lot of things to, like, on a daily basis, I have to practice. And there was part of me where meditation felt like I'm just going to let that part of me spin out for a little bit. Like I'm going to be bad in this area and not meditate, just like see if I can like muscle through life. And I do, and I did, and I muscled through life. And it's not like your life totally spins out because you're not sitting every day, but it felt like I forget what the word is, where you're just like harmful to yourself on purpose. Like that's almost what it felt like, is I wasn't giving myself what I knew I needed. And there would be days where it was like, oh, this would have been way easier had I been meditating, even just for 5 minutes, and, I went on a trip just last week with my best friend, and she looked at me and she's like, maybe you should start meditating again. Cause she was seeing me kind of spin. And I said, if I'm hearing that from my best girlfriend, I got to do it. And so I got back from the trip, and every morning since I've been sitting, and, it will always be part of my life. But, I wonder, we can only be so good so often. And at some point we just also have to be human and say, like, I don't want to wake up early to meditate, which is totally fair.
That's why I felt that was an important question, because it's like, I know in the research you say, give yourself permission to, and I read it in several things I read about you. So it's almost like you gave yourself permission to
totally
quit on something, it's good. And that's important, because sometimes we know we cannot keeping up with everything that we know it's good. It's very hard. But the important thing is to go back to it.
Yeah.
To learn to go back to it. I think that's kind of like big important thing.
Yeah. And so many of us judge ourselves off of what we can add and remove from life. Like I've stopped eating this, I've stopped doing this, I've stopped doing that, or I've added yoga, I've added this, I've added that. Like it becomes kind of this back and forth game where sometimes we just have to listen to our body and say, this is a season of rest and I just want to sleep in. And that is okay.
I love it. This is the season. I think there's a book in there somehow. I feel this is the season 2. And
I love that. Yeah.
A chapter for each thing.
I just had book club last night, and the book ended with, we all die, but we have to find the seasons of the strawberry season or something. And it was like this most beautiful quote of, life is suffering, and it's our job to find the beauty in it and to remember that we're all on our way to pass away. And, it's on us to be gentle and find the peace in it. So. Beautiful. Well, Maddy, this has been fantastic. I appreciate your time, your wisdom, the perspective, different life experience. I think that's true diversity. Is not of it's experience for me. It's more than a gender, a thing, a taste. It's just really the diversity in perspective and life experiences that is what makes us rich. And so I appreciate you sharing with us. And for you all out there, Maddy's webpage and Childfree will be on our show notes. Wish you all the best and keep up the good work. And I'm sure this venture, not only will it be successful, but also you're making impact and helping others, which I think is where the biggest fulfillment is. Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you for your work and elevating voices. I really appreciate being on.
Awesome. Thank you all. And to you out there, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And please rate and review if you like it. Share it with your crowd, especially this one, those that don't have children and need estate planning help. Take care. And until the next episode of Back to Basics.
You've been listening to Back to Basics. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you haven't yet, subscribe, rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcast or any of your favorite streaming platforms. This is the best gift you can give us. Join me next week for another Back to Basics conversation. And if you want to find out about other exciting things I'm working on, visit leticialatino.com. Thank you, and until the next time.